What was the Renaissance? The Renaissance was a time period from 1350 to 1600 when humanism, the glorification of men and the rediscovery of Greek and Roman classics, was becoming very widespread beliefs. It is also the time when many new art styles were created and improved upon. It was in this period when humanism spread across the world. It was also the time of many talented artists such as Da Vinci, Donatello, Raphael, and Michelangelo. Since it was a largely secular time period, many new philosophies and ideas were created. One such philosopher was Machiavelli. He believed that humans were unkind in their nature. There were also several architects who created new ways to build things. One such person was Filippo Brunelleschi. He was in charge of constructing the dome at the Florence Cathedral, a very difficult task for its time period. The cathedral was in the Gothic style, since it had begun construction in 1200s. However, most other churches being built were in the classical or Romanesque style. The Medicis were a banking family who dominated the upper class of Florence, Italy, a major Renaissance city. They were a big deal for around the first half of the 1400s. One famous Medici was Lorenzo the Great. He ruled Florence for about 20 years and he brought peace in that time. However, a man named Savonarola began to advocate against tyranny, and when the Medici were overthrown, he became the religious and political leader of France, giving him complete power. However, he was eventually burned and killed at the stake because he claimed that he could not burn. What was Renaissance humanism? How did it play a role in the development of the Renaissance? Renaissance humanism was the belief that humans were created in God's image and that they should be glorified because of that. It also focused on the studying of other works besides the Bible, such as Greek and Roman classics. As a result, it was considered secular. It also focused on the importance of grammar, poetry, history, and philosophy. Why did the Renaissance begin in Italy? The Renaissance began in Italy because it was the center of trade in the Mediterranean Sea. Also, the residents of Italy saw themselves as the descendants of Rome because Rome is located in Italy, and this is also partially why they began to study Greek and Roman classics. How did art change during the Renaissance? How did humanism and new techniques impact what artists created? Art changed during the Renaissance by the creation of new painting techniques and updating old ones. One that was updated was perspective. In medieval art, people would just stack on top of each other. With what Renaissance artists discovered was that things appeared smaller as they got farther away. Another was sfumato. This technique softened the edges of lines so that smoother transitions of color could be made. Another technique created during this time was chiaroscuro. This technique creates heavy contrast between colors to make something stand out. Humanism and the belief that people were created in God's image resulted in many paintings portraying unclothed people. Also, many paintings were secular and were not all about Christianity, like they were in medieval times. Discuss Northern Humanism. How does Christian humanism form a connection between the Renaissance and the Reformation? Northern humanism was a result of Italian humanism spreading to Europe through war and trade. It took on a more Christian and less secular feel. It combined humanist beliefs with those of the Bible. It connects to the Reformation in the sense that many Northern thinkers criticized the Church. Thomas More and Erasmus saw some problems in the Church and voiced them, but they did not ever want to leave the Church. The Church faced criticisms from people such as Erasmus and Martin Luther. One of the criticisms was that many priests got married, even though it was forbidden. Pope Leo X was rebuilding St. Peter's Basilica and he needed money for that. So he sent John Tetzel to sell indulgences. The Bible said that God forgives you if you ask, but the church was saying you had to pay for it. These were the things people were criticizing and why the church was facing widespread criticism. Describe how Martin Luther challenged the church. Martin Luther was a German monk who wrote 95 theses that spoke out against the sale of indulgences, simony, and the fact that church officials were very hypocritical. Luther also preached the idea of sola fide, which is the belief that you do not have to do good works to be saved. He also preached sola gratia, by grace alone, and sola scriptura, by scripture alone. Pope Leo X was furious with Martin and wanted to put him on trial in Rome, where he likely would have been killed. Luckily, Prince Frederick the Wise convinced the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V to have the trial in Worms, Germany instead. This trial was called the Diet of Worms. When Martin Luther would not recant his words, he was excommunicated from the church. As a result, all of his writings were added to the Index of Forbidden Books. While Luther was in hiding, he translated the Bible into German, the common language of the people. 1555, the Peace of Augsburg ended the political argument between Protestantism and Catholicism. The religious cause of the Reformation was that many people, such as Martin Luther and Erasmus, were criticizing the church. This led to the eventual divide between Catholicism and Protestantism. An economic reason for the Reformation was that the Catholic Church was kinder to those with more money. A cardinal position could be bought in the church. When all these peasants who had been treated poorly by the church for years heard someone was challenging the church, they wanted in. This is also partially what sparked the Peasant War that took place in 1524 to 1525. The poor peasants wanted to be treated equally in all aspects, so they rose up. Sadly, the peasants were very unorganized, and 100,000 people were killed. The political reason is very similar. Many of the church officials were corrupt and did not care for God much, but for money and power. Martin Luther saw this and called them out. Another major Protestant movement around the time of the Reformation was Calvinism. Calvinism was started by Ulrich Zwingli. He, like Luther, had many criticisms about the Catholic Church. However, he and Luther disagreed about a couple things, one being predestination. Predestination is the belief that God decided who will be saved at the beginning of time. Unfortunately, Zwingli was killed in a battle between Catholics and Protestants. His apprentice, John Calvin, carried on his teachings, and that is where the name Calvinism comes from. Calvinism spread to France, and this group was named the Huguenots. At the time, France was a Catholic country. In 1589, however, King Henry IV signed the Edict of Nantes, which allowed the Huguenots to believe in Calvinism. The Catholic Church did not see Protestantism as a serious threat until around 1530, when they realized something had to be done. Thus began the Counter-Reformation. This was an attempt by the Catholic Church to make the church more spiritual. Pope Paul III was the pope at the time, and he appointed only spiritual men in places of power. He brought the Inquisition to the church, which meant burning heretics at the stake and other cruel punishments. They did, however, not hunt down Protestants, rather they tried to purify the Catholic Church. In 1545, Pope Paul III summoned all the leaders of the church so they could clearly define Catholic beliefs. This was called the Council of Trent, because they met in a city named Trent. They ended the selling of indulgences, but emphasized the use of ceremonies as a way to worship God. In 1534, Ignatius Loyola had founded the Jesuit order. They were recognized as an official order of the Catholic Church and believed one could be saved from doing good deeds.